What really struck me was that work that I did, I know benefited people's lives. And so there was this insane feeling of fulfillment. It's like, oh my gosh, like little old me, I've just done something which people are going to have indirectly, but just the little bit that I could have helped. It's like people are going to have a better life because of something I did. And that was an amazing feeling. And it's like, yeah, give me more of that. If I can use my skills for the good of the world, then I want to do that.
Welcome to the To Be Human podcast, Matthew Smeal.
Thank you, Jennah.
It's a pleasure to see you, Matthew.
Pleasure to see you, as always. Thank you.
So I want to start with a quote of yours from a pending book that you're writing. Mm-hmm. And it was a beautiful quote that I would love to share. Heading down to the beach to enjoy a guilt-free swim has taken a long time. And I'm not there yet. But instead of the usual guilt and confusion, I realize that the ocean is there and I need to be in it. I need to do it for me, to process the things I have seen. Although mild compared to other photojournalists and aid workers, I know. And to make sense of the world that I know exists outside of Sydney's northern beaches. So, Matt, I know personally that the ocean is a very special place for you, where you believe that is a place that we can find ourselves. So I'd love if you could share more on that.
Wow. It's really interesting actually having people read back something you've written. Yeah, that was interesting. I've done this work, the photojournalism work, for about 15 years now, and one of the things I struggle with, and a lot of people I think struggle with, is you come back to somewhere like Sydney, and it's so wonderful, it's so easy, and you think, you get to go and do something like go surfing, go to the beach, at the best beaches in the world, and it is hard, and you have those moments of why, and this isn't fair, and all of that kind of thing. But I think I got to a point where I thought, it's not like, it would just be silly to not enjoy the life that we have. And I just realized that that's a place for me. Like it's a place for me. It's where I feel very comfortable, and it is a place I go to heal. So I just think the ocean, whether I'm surfing or swimming, walking along the beach, sitting on a headland, anything like that, as long as there's water nearby, like a running tap will do it some days. But I just need to be there. So I love it. And I think more and more I've realized how much I need it. It is interesting too. I don't spend a lot of time overseas, particularly now, of course, but it's the one thing that I miss when I am away. And it's like, I just can't wait to get home and get to a beach. So, that's, the ocean's a good place to be.
And because obviously this, from what I've seen so far, I've had a sneak peek of the book that you're currently writing, and the ocean is such a big aspect in what you write about. How is it sort of snuck into being such a big aspect in your book?
Interesting. Like every other writer, I think I've got 20 other books that I've started and stopped, and whether it's a discipline thing or just where I'm at, what I tend to write about, I just found that actually how it came about was quite interesting. I was just writing little snippets, and it came so easily that a lot of the other work that I was writing, it was a slog. It wasn't coming easily, and I'm trying to develop characters and do all those kinds of things, and it just wasn't coming that easily. Love the ideas, and I still think the ideas are great, right? But I just off to the side, I'd write something really easily about swimming or the ocean and being in solitude, that kind of thing, and that connection with nature and with the ocean. And then I went away at the end of last year, the end of 2020, and just sat on the beach for 3 days up the coast on my own. And I just wrote, You know, I'd just get up in the morning, I'd go and have a swim. I'd just sit on this deserted beach and with a little notepad, I'd just write. And when I came home, I suddenly realized I had all this stuff about the ocean and connecting with nature and sitting on sand dunes, right? And then I had all this other work that I'd already done. And before I knew it, I thought, my gosh, this is the book I've been writing without realizing it. I just had it all. It was all happening in bits and pieces, but there was that common theme that was running through it. And it was just a matter of tying it all together and then realizing, okay, that's the direction. This is where I'm supposed to be going with this. Go with it. So I just kept writing.
And I know, like, obviously with like the idea of solitude through your swimming, and I know you also love motorbike riding, and you speak about this, the concept of presence is in the connection with nature. Are these sort of things that you have always felt have been like an important part of you, or is this kind of been a process? Because obviously you share you're someone that deeply reflects. Is it kind of been that journey that's kind of led you to I guess becoming more mindful of how important all these things have been in your life?
Yeah, I sound like a terrible loner, don't I? I just
want
to say I love my wife. I love my family. I love my friends when I bother to speak to them. I actually think it's been part of a journey, like, to be perfectly honest. And when I look back, I do realize how important that time was for me growing up. And I think more and more, I love people, love being with people, love my friends. But, again, personality-wise, I think I really need that time. I need that solitude. And it's like, you do several months and you're flat out at work, you're flat out with everything. And then it was actually that recent trip I mentioned before. It was actually my wife saying, you need to go away. You need to get on your motorbike and you need to disappear and she's like got the calendar out, right? She's going, there's your window of opportunity, those days right there. Because if you don't do it now, we've got all these other things coming up. And that's, so you got to listen to your significant other those sort of times. And she knows me well enough to know that it's important for me. But I think, growing up, I mean, as I look back, I think there were those times when I did, I'd be with people, I'd do all that, but I'd often then find myself alone for a day or two. And I remember when I was probably late teens, early 20s, I did start to head up the coast, and that was more around photography. But I throw a couple of surfboards in my van, and I'd guitar and a bit of camping gear, and I'd just disappear for a few weeks, and had the luxury to do that then, and never really thought too much about it. It was just something I enjoyed doing, and that was when I was doing more sort of moving into that fine art photography realm. But as I look back, I just realized, it's been a big part of my life. And also even the traveling, because I do travel mostly alone. I mean, I'll go off, I'll be sent somewhere on an assignment for whichever organization, and then you turn up, you're doing all the travel on your own. You turn up somewhere, you get embedded with whoever you're with, and you do the work. But it's really, it's you on your own, and you come back. So I don't know. It's just been, but then I think more and more I've just realized how much I enjoy it. So
I find it sounds almost like it's like your safe space, and I feel like I relate to that a lot. It's like we, particularly as children, like, we have these sort of like safe spaces in our life that for me personally, I find I come back to as an adult. And for me also, a big part of that is the ocean. And you sort of go out into the big wide world and you experience life, but there's sort of that certainty and that comfort that comes with being near the sea.
Yeah, definitely. And I think everyone's got their own thing, whether it's the sea or the desert or whatever. There's some place that just makes people feel connected and happy. And I think, particularly the last couple of years, I think people are really finding that again, which is good, which is great. And I think for me, I've always known sort of what it is. But I think, from a creative point of view as well, I mean, people love cities. I love hustle and bustle. I love all that. That just drives me mental. But I mean, for me, it's that creative space too. It's just where you can I mean, something I've been reading about in recent times is a thing called Nixon, which is a Dutch concept, just about letting your mind wander. And I think everyone's gotten into things like mindfulness and all that, which is fantastic. But to just the way I sort of likened it, and I can't remember if it was in the bit of writing that I sent you, but I do write about it a little bit. But the analogy I came up with was it's like a saucepan full of boiling water and the lid's on top, and that lid's lifting up all sorts of different places as the pressure builds up, and it just releases, different spots, and sometimes the lid comes right up, and I think that's kind of Nixon. It just lets, if you just let your mind go where it needs to go, it knows what it needs to do. The brain knows what it needs to process, and it's giving yourself permission to do that, giving yourself space to do that. And I kind of like that. I like to sort of, you go somewhere and there's just no one around, and you've got this whole beach to yourself, or this whole campsite to yourself, or the bush, or whatever. And you just sit there for a bit and you go, right, what do you want to think about, and that's also part of motorbike riding is I think, in a car you're closed in, you're not connecting with what's around you, and usually got your music playing or whatever. But on a bike, it's the sights, it's the smells, if there's roadkill, if there's a garbage truck a kilometre in front of you, you pick up on all the sights and smells, if you're coming up near a bakery, all those kinds of things, and you can connect with the world around you. And I often find that, I've turned up somewhere and you've got all that thinking, it's already done. You've just done hours of it on the bike. And there's a saying I came across once, which is you never see a motorbike parked outside a psychologist's office, because you've done it all. You've done all your processing.
So in terms of processing, because it sort of seems to be an underlying theme when we talk about the ocean and motorbike riding and things that you really enjoy, and by the sounds of it are really reconnected with during COVID, because obviously this has kind of changed an aspect to your life that you normally go out on international assignments and you're sort of moving around the world, and you've sort of had to stay put recently. In terms of like your metaphor of like things bubbling to the surface, has that been really healing for you to have that time during COVID to kind of sit still and reflect on? From what I'm aware, for years you've been traveling around the world working in assignments in relation particularly to health.
I don't know. I don't know if it's healing or if it's I think it's been necessary. And being such a reflective person, it's I think it's probably that sort of, it's made me stop, but then everything's kind of caught up and to be honest, hit me pretty hard. Whereas normally I'd be, what's next, and probably haven't dealt with some of the other stuff too well. So yeah, it's given me time to do that. But then, just itchy feet, just get me on a plane, please. I need to go somewhere, and I need to go and photograph something. And actually, it was interesting. I had to get my cameras out the other day. I got asked to do a portrait shoot for somebody, and I just almost unraveled. It was just, it was a great little shoot, but it was, there are the cameras, and what lenses do I take? And I felt like I was getting ready to go, to Laos or something, and I really wanted to, but it was like, no, I'm going down to photograph somebody else. And it was, I mean, it's great to do it, but it's, I just realized how much I miss it. But then I'm also nervous. It's like when the time comes again, or do I do a, pivot? I hate that word, but do I find something else to try and document here? I don't know. I'll just write. I'll just keep writing.
I would definitely support that, because I think that's a beautiful segue. I would love to know more about, because you speak about growing up and taking photos like at sort of your younger self when you're a bit of a surfer on the coast. How does this kind of like transform into becoming a photojournalist in relation to like humanitarian NGO work?
Yeah, interestingly, I love that whole process. I loved, and I still do. Like, I mean, any artist will tell you that time when you can get out there, you can create, you can learn, you're developing a style, whether it's painting, sculpting, photography, whatever it might be, poetry, writing. I mean, it's all the same. It's I love that time, and I do work preferably. I work in black and white, and that was the work that I did, the fine art work, and I learned so much about that during that time that I can use those skills now when I do my work. And so, but to answer your question, yeah, like I think it was that. It's a hard way to make a living, and I just found myself in Uganda one day, which seems ridiculous, but it kind of happened in a very serendipitous way. I think I just heard about a crisis pregnancy center in Uganda that the church I was at was supporting, and they needed a new dormitory built because there were so many girls turning up in Kampala to this who'd been raped, had become pregnant. Because they were pregnant, they weren't allowed to be at home because they were single, which was a cultural taboo. And so you've got these teenage girls who'd been raped because there was a civil war on, raped by men from both sides. And these poor girls, suddenly kicked out of their home, kicked out of their village, finding themselves in the city with nowhere to go, and suddenly, with a baby to support. And I thought, well, I can go to Uganda. I got some time. I'll go to Uganda. I'll help build this thing. And then I went, well, that's stupid. Why would I take the work away from a Ugandan guy who probably needs the labouring work? But I thought, well, I've got other skills I could use. Maybe I could tell that story. And I was working. What was I doing at the time? I was working on a small newspaper at the time as a journalist and photographer. And I just took my leave. I took 4 weeks leave, and I rang the Sydney Morning Herald and I said, hey, I'm going to Uganda, and can I do this story? And suddenly next thing I knew, I'm in this meeting with, the commissioning editor and the editor of News Review. And yeah, they're looking through my portfolio, and yeah, it was just something, and then I was ringing other organizations and, hey, I'm going to Uganda. What do you want? And I got a call from MSF saying, Médecins Sans Frontières, like hours after. I sent this email like at 6 o'clock one night. At 9 o'clock the next morning, my phone's ringing. Who are you? Like, this is fantastic. We've been trying to get a journalist to go to Uganda for years. And at that point, it was one of the top 20 most underreported countries in the world. And, suddenly everything just came together. And suddenly I'm on a flight to Uganda going, what the heck am I doing? How did this happen? And of course, MSF, like, well, if you're going to Uganda, can you do this story for us? And while you're there, would you mind going to Kenya? And then for my own self, I thought, I'm going to go to Cambodia on the way home. So suddenly I'm, this is back in 2006. It was my first photojournalism assignment. And I ended up writing a massive feature for the Herald. And then a couple of other pieces came from that. MSF used the photos for years from that. And I'm there going, wow, what just happened? That was crazy, and then that kickstarted. And then, of course, everyone's like, what else you got? What are you going to do now? So I went back, and then other things happened. So yeah, that's how it transitioned. 1 minute, I'm just there going, I don't know, I just want to take a photo of a beach, and the next minute I'm in Uganda going, I think that was a real transition for me too. That was okay, so this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because success is the wrong word, but I had more success, or more, I don't know what I really don't want to use the word success, but what really struck me was that work that I did, I know benefited people's lives. And so there was this insane feeling of fulfillment. It's like, oh my gosh, like little old me, I've just done something which people are going to have indirectly, but just the little bit that I could have helped. It's like people are going to have a better life because of something I did. And that was an amazing feeling. And it's like, yeah, give me more of that. If I can use my skills for the good of the world, then I want to do that. So it was pretty cool. It's a pretty good feeling. Yeah.
And when you were over there, because it's a massive transition, did your model of the world, like the way in which you saw life, did that begin to change in that journey?
Yes and no. Like, I think it was always there. Like, I'd like to think of myself as a fairly, actually no, maybe not. I had come out of, a long period as a fairly self-centered surfer, I guess. And, there really wasn't that much else to life. But I think deep down, I knew that I had been that person that was a little bit very concerned about the environment in the early 80s, in high school and through the 80s. And, got hassled and picked on for being the greenie in the year. So there's always an element of social justice and humanitarianism and, environmentalism. So I knew it was there, and I was actually going and uncovering it and then just seeing it for myself and then going, well, I can't turn my back on that. I've actually seen it. And once you've seen it, you're really in trouble because you go, I can't. Yeah, how do you walk away from that and pretend it never happened? And so I always get worried when I see people who've done that one little trip overseas and then that's it for them. And I go, how have you not changed your life? Not being judgmental at all, but I think, how do you, that was, for me anyway, for the type of person I am, it's like, give me more. I've got to do more of that. I've got to do everything I can to help if I can.
So did you feel an element of responsibility in returning and continuing that work?
Yeah, I did. Which, I think, just plain and simple. I think, I just realized at that point in time I couldn't do anything else. And, taking photo. I mean, I still love photography and like fine art and artistic photography. But gosh, if you can tell a story, if you can show that story, present that story of what's actually happening in the world, particularly to somewhere like Australia, where it's we're so closed off. I don't want to say isolationist, but it is the tyranny of distance. We are, we're a little island, and when you actually see how much of the world live, I just felt like, if it's something that I can do, then absolutely I want to do that.
And do you ever feel like, in coming back to Australia, do you ever feel frustrated that not everybody is aware of like what is happening outside of, quote unquote, the lucky country?
I'm better at it now. Pretty hopeless at it. I was the guy that would be in tears at the barbecue, right? And because people would be like, oh, what? And again, it was just me trying to get my head around what I'd just seen and what I'd just done. And I remember one time, I was just sitting there, around the barbie with a couple of guys, and someone said, oh, what was it like over there? And, what did you see? And without no warning at all, I'm just started bawling my eyes out. And went, whoops, okay. And I think everyone's looking at their shoes, like no one knew what to do. And I didn't know what to do. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, that's kind of weird. And then I'm, from that, I'd feel really like, you're sitting on the bus going to work or something, or you're at work or you're at somewhere going, why do you people not know this? And that transition back's always been a tricky one. And like, I feel like I should say, like, I know a number of photojournalists who've been in, photographed a lot worse things than I have. And it's, it's bad enough for me. And I've had a pretty light experience compared to many. And I don't know how they get through the day. I really don't. But yeah, I think there is that frustration, as you say, for sure, where you go, oh my goodness, it's so easy here, right? Life's just like even COVID, right? So it's not that, well, I don't want to say it's not that bad. It is bad for people, but it's, I couldn't imagine what it's like in India right now, or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, something like that, or Nepal. A lot of places are doing it so tough. And it's hard. And that's just now. I mean, there's always a humanitarian crisis somewhere. So anyway, I'll go down these rabbit holes. So I'll pause.
Well, I'm very fascinated because I feel like, it's big when you go, like, I almost compartmentalize it into two different worlds, right? You've got your life in Sydney, in beautiful Australia, and then you've got this kind of world that's outside of that. Is that how you feel like most people manage that, is kind of separating the two? Because otherwise I feel like, we can think about, obviously in India right now, it's very, very challenging for people.
Yep.
To be able to live our life in a mentally healthy way. Do you have sort of any idea of how to manage that? Because that's a lot to hold on our shoulders, the awareness that there are people out there doing it a lot worse than we are.
Yeah, and that's taken me a long time to get my head around. And as we started this conversation about when I wrote, it's taken me a long time to be able to go and have a guilt-free swim. It's part of that. And I remember early on. Actually, I think it was my first trip. It took me a month or something, maybe longer, before I could actually go to the supermarket. There's just no way I was going to go back there and see that kind of choice that we had. And I'll never forget hearing a story around that time of, I think she was a midwife or a nurse, and I believe she was in Darfur during that whole famine crisis. And I heard the story that she'd come back and just broke down in the pet food aisle at the local supermarket, had to be carried out by security, because she's just spent something like 9 months or whatever it was in a horrendous famine situation, and then just sees this aisle of pet food and this ridiculous choice that we have for dogs and cats, and it just that was her undoing. But yeah, I've seen other and I've heard other stories of people that have really struggled with coming, with that transition back. And where I find it, it's interesting with what I do, because I'm there for a couple of weeks, maybe a month at the most, and then I'm back home. And I find that really difficult because it's like nothing's changed, right? But then for people where it is such a long time, and then they come back and probably found exactly the same thing, that this life's gone on back here, I think that'd be really hard. I think that would be crazy. So, but yeah, you have to go. Yeah, it's just one of those things. It is hard to. It's like, this is life here, and I've just got to readjust. That's life over there, and I've just got to adjust to that. But what I find is that it gets difficult when you keep adjusting and readjusting and adjusting and readjusting. You never fully adjust all the way back, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, because I know I read on your blog, and it seemed to me to almost be this like sense of displacement that can happen with like aid workers. I think you termed it like parachute journalism, where you go over to an assignment, but it's not long enough for things to change back home, and it's also not long enough that you're still a visitor wherever you're visiting to, right? So it's kind of like you almost feel like you don't belong anywhere, or it's hard to adjust to that.
Yeah, it's the imposter syndrome in a massive way, and you're not part of it, and you haven't been away long enough, you haven't been embedded with the team for long enough, but you're still part of it for that. And actually, that's something that I did find really strange. Is I remember one time in Nigeria, I'd been there for about 2 weeks, and when I was with a surgeon, when we left, there are people standing there like other aid workers, and they're in tears as they're saying goodbye to us, and it's like, gosh, I've only been here for 2 weeks, everyone's really emotional and upset, but it's so intense. That period of time is so intense, and you really do become part of it. And then you suddenly have to, 24 hours later or 48 hours later, you're back in Sydney going, what the heck, it's tricky. So, I don't know if that answered that, but.
And how do you feel with, because this is just like a personal interest of mine, in ultra marathon running, particularly over like a multi-stage race, people come together and they have they form a deep bond with each other. And I can only assume that that's what happens with you when you go on assignment. As you said, you're in an intense situation. Obviously, it's very different to running, but I always see this like theme of when people come together and they do difficult things together, that they really have this like beautiful sense of human connection that sort of manifests from something like that.
Yeah, I think it's vulnerability. I think it's born out of vulnerability, because you turn up somewhere. As I said, I travel on my own, and so I'm not mostly. So for a lot of the time, and the way I actually really enjoy, the way I prefer is being on my own. But you turn up somewhere, you've got a contact that you've met through email and a couple of phone calls, and then maybe you get picked up at the airport. Usually they forget. But you're completely vulnerable, and you just have to open yourself up and go, right, I need to trust in this person I've never met, or find a way to get to where I've got to get to, and it's a really different kind of way of living. And I think when you do get to with the people that you're supposed to be with, and you just think, okay, I've got, this is me, this is them, and I don't want to say, you're putting your life in your hands. I mean, sometimes you are, but it's is that vulnerability. And so there is just this incredible initial connection where you're saying, I'm a guest in this country. I've got no idea where I am. I've got no idea what about the culture, and I'm going to be here for a couple of weeks, and, kind of do with me as you will kind of thing. It's like, I got no idea what's going to come from this. Particularly when wherever you are. I mean, sometimes, I'm not trying to make it sound too dramatic, but when there, a lot of guns around and you're going through checkpoints, and I think that was one of my first experiences. There's still a civil war going on in Uganda, and, I'm up north, and I'm hiding my cameras and not supposed to be taking photos of this, that, and the other. And nothing too dramatic, but it's just that, got chased by soldiers once. But that was, it's just that kind of stuff. And you go, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, this is really kind of a little dodgy, but you're really trying to trust the people that you're with, that, if they say, put your camera down, you put your camera down. If they say, here, put this on, pretend you're a doctor for a second, well, you do that, and you kind of think, I don't know what's happening here, but I just got to go with it. And you're completely vulnerable. And, someone says, right, jump in the car, we're going this way, we're going to this place. And okay, I hope you know what you're doing, and I hope you are who you say you are. But it's great. I love that. I actually kind of enjoy that. I love that you are really putting a trust into somebody, and it's great.
And have you ever experienced a moment where, like on assignment, you've had to say no to something because it just was too big of a risk?
Ooh, no, it's probably things I wish I did, but not really. I mean, as I said, I've been lucky. I haven't really been in that. I mean, I've not done conflict photography, and I know people who have, and so it's probably that just in itself. I'm saying that is a big risk, and as a husband and a father, I've sort of made that decision that's probably something I don't want to do. Although then I sort of go, maybe, but no, nothing really sort of jumps out.
Yeah, because with this type of photography, like you're suggesting, and I remember, because obviously you and I met at MSF. I was coming in for an interview to become a communications intern, and I remember we had the discussion about aid workers and photojournalists that were almost having to make a strong decision, whether it was conscious or subconscious, that if you make a life and a career out of this may jeopardize your ability to have a family, or if you have a family, it jeopardizes relationships within that network.
Yeah.
Do you feel like on every potential assignment, you're having to kind of weigh up how that's going to affect the people around you?
Yeah, it's probably manifests itself differently. Maybe more when you come back. I do remember one assignment. I won't go into detail, but I do remember. I think it was the night before I left, and I was so nervous because I didn't trust the people that were sending me over there, and I I was really worried about that. And it was potentially pretty dodgy. And like that was oddly probably the most dangerous assignment that I did. And it was around child sex trafficking. And we were sort of, I wasn't sure how deep we were going to get into that. But we were going to be going to some pretty sketchy places. And obviously when you're trying to photograph and film that kind of thing that's going on, it could end quite badly. And it was that kind of, I'm sitting there and I think, my kids are quite young and I'm thinking, I don't want to do it. What am I doing? This is a stupid one, and because I think as I got closer and closer to it, I was starting to probably realize how potentially amateur the people were that I was actually going to be working with. And not happy about that one. So that one just came about. I'd written the piece about it when I was working for UNICEF, and then someone called me and said, "Hey, I want to do it's a documentary. Can you come?" And it was that kind of a thing. And I kind of initially went, "Yeah, great, cool, another trip, another assignment." But yeah, it was that that sort of nervousness, that anxiety around it, and then thinking, yeah, if this hit, then it's sort of a wake up call, I guess. You go, this could have ramifications, longer term. But it was all good, thankfully, in the end. It actually came to nothing, but it was pretty horrible stuff to film.
And what assignment for you has been a really rewarding one?
Apart from that one, I think all of them, to be honest, I think they all have their moments. I think that very first one I did to Uganda, I mentioned about the crisis pregnancy situation, and that was at a time when there's a lot of child soldiers, kids being abducted. I think that was a massive hit for me because straight off the plane, suddenly I'm in northern Uganda. I'm sitting in a shelter where all these kids were just, kind of like being dropped off almost by their parents. They're coming out of the bushes and at dusk, purely to be so they could live in sleep in a shelter that night, so they didn't get abducted by the Lord's Resistance Army, which were terrorizing the place at the time. And to sit there and be with those kids in a shelter for a couple of nights, and these kids were not much older than my own children. Some were. I think, as my son was about 4 at the time. And there were kids who were like 4 years old there. And that was terrifying. I think that was a real surprise. And then knowing that a lot of the girls from that situation were the ones that were being raped, becoming pregnant, ending up in this centre that crisis pregnancy centre called Wakisa in Kampala, a wonderful, wonderful organisation. They would help those girls and try and reconcile them back to their families, but teach the girls life skills so those girls could go out and actually earn a living to provide for themselves and for their newborn baby. But where I realized, that was just a mind blow anyway, just that whole experience. But then where it really got me, I think, was, 6 months or something after I got home, or after the story was published. I was, in a shopping centre somewhere doing my slideshow, giving a talk about, I got asked to do a talk and show my photos. And this lady came up to me and she said, "You're that guy that wrote that story for the Sydney Morning Herald, aren't you?" And, this was like 6 months later. And I thought, wow, someone remembered that. Someone read that and put 2 and 2 together. And I thought, that's amazing. That was, I think that was in part that realization of, okay, this is powerful. As a journalist, as a storyteller, I can actually do things that people see, people remember, people take action on. So that, I think I'll just always remember that. That was a nice moment.
And in working side by side with child soldiers, obviously you have children of your own. How do you kind of translate to them to truly appreciate what we have?
You can't. I tried. Eat your vegetables. It's tricky because you just actually what I realized was how much the context is so different, and here we are on the northern beaches of Sydney, and life's beautiful, and the world outside is beautiful, and how do you explain to an 8-year-old or something, or a 4-year-old at the time, and a 1-year-old, my daughter was 1, but over the years, they've seen some photos, they've seen Dad have his moments, but and we talk it through, and it's all you can do. You can sort of find that line of how do I expose my kids to this, and I may have done that well, I may not have. I think time will tell, but just try to make it real. Just make sure that we know that they know about what's actually happening in the world, and they don't need to. You don't need to be there to to see it firsthand, but just to be aware. That's all I can do.
And I know just then you brought up, Dad, children seeing Dad have his moments, and that I'm aware that has to do with your assignment that was in Nigeria. I think first I would love to ask, obviously you've done quite a few assignments. You've done Uganda and Kenya and Bangladesh, and, there's been quite a lot, Lau. And as your friend, I'm aware that Nigeria was kind of very different to other experiences. How does that, how do I ask this question? What is the difference between those assignments that has you, I suppose, experiencing it in a different way?
Death. It was pure and simple, and the helplessness of watching babies die in front of me. It was just that simple, for no reason. And I think that's the tragedy of it. My kids were born in a private hospital in Sydney. We had our own room. It was, and then to see women being wheeled in wheelbarrows, who'd been in labour for 4 days, and that's not going to end well. To be sitting on the floor of a hospital, and the power's gone out. The generator won't start, and we're operating on the floor, just using my camera light. That's hard. That's different. To have a baby that was born that's 1 minute fine and then just stopped breathing, and we're trying to resuscitate. And didn't. And you just think if that was in Australia, in every one of those situations, that was just my life for every day for 2 weeks. They're just the ones I remember. But just knowing that if that was in Sydney or in Australia, it just wouldn't have happened, But I think so much of that tragedy was just for most of those women, that was not the first time. And just knowing how fleeting life can be. But yeah, it's but even weird things too. Actually, I won't go there. But it's, I think that was just different. That was, I just remember the first surgery, the first time I pulled my cameras out on that assignment, and just the surgeon turned to me and he's like, "Are you okay?" Not because I was looking like I wasn't, but he just needed to know. And I'm quickly setting up. I've hit record. I'm rolling, and he just looked at me. He's like, "You're right," and I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he told me later. He said, "I had to ask because," he said, "I've seen other guys just run, and they've just gone straight to the airport." And I just thought, no, I can't fail here. This is too important. But it's like, this was 5 years ago. I still struggle to get through a conversation about it. And at the time you think, this is going to mess me up a lot. And you think, but I've just got to keep going, because it's where we talked earlier about that responsibility. But yeah, and you think, yeah, I'm here now. I've got to do this job, and I need people to see this. And So anyway, that's so the difference is, I think it's that, I don't want to say injustice. It's just the difference. It's poverty. You're in a very impoverished part of a country and you realise healthcare is. I'll never complain about healthcare in Australia again. Seriously. And then you go to visit those women the next day, and they're sharing a bed with, like, a single bed in a recovery ward with 2 other women, some of whom have their newborns with them, the ones who survived. And trying to reconcile that in your own head, going, well, we had our own private room there. And it's, yeah. And then, like, a goat walks through, the the ward. You go, okay, there's a goat in the ward, right? Of course, there's a goat in the ward, right? But, where else is a goat going to be? It's going to be in the maternity ward. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, I just that's the difference, I guess. Yeah.
And obviously, thank you for sharing, by the way.
Yeah.
In working for MSF, obviously, particularly in the communication section, you would be aware of these stories happening. And what I'm really curious about is, because I know that creating awareness about these aspects of life is very important to you. In being in Nigeria and seeing these things firsthand, they're no longer things that you're reading about or seeing pictures of. Is there a really big difference in that? Like, for me, that sort of reads your story or hears your story, I can empathize to an extent, but obviously between you and I in that experience, there is a massive disconnect. Do you think that was that like kind of a really one of the first moments for you that you really experienced that difference of like, oh, like I am really in this right now versus reading a story about it?
It was a change for me. It was definitely it was the deepest thing. Actually, what was interesting was, at the time, it was quite, like, it was kind of like, wow, it's like my brain shut down and we just did it, right? And I remember sitting on a plane, I can't remember where I was, but I was on the way home anyway, and I'm on the plane going, really freaking out, because I'm thinking 2 things. I don't want to leave. It's like, I just want to stay here for the rest of my life and keep doing this, or send me somewhere else, But the other thing was, why am I not falling apart right now? And, why am I so unemotional about this? And I realized later that was just my brain dealing with it, because I fell apart later. But yeah, I think it felt real. I think it was like, okay, now we're really here. This is, and that's why we went to that part of Nigeria too, because we knew that's where we were doing training films for surgeons. So it was basically saying, this is as bad as it gets in mother and child health, and we needed to go somewhere where we're just going to get hit with everything and capture as much as we possibly could for a couple of weeks, so then we could turn that into a series of films and show surgeons when you come anywhere in the world, you might get confronted with this. If you're, it doesn't, not just Nigeria, but it was just that project was just so notoriously bad. And it was funny because I remember going to the office when I got back and walked in to see the medical unit, who are the specialists in mother and child health for MSF around the world, and they just hugged me. They'd all been to that project, and they all hugged me. And the head of the medical unit just whispers in my ear, welcome. And I'm like, welcome? I've known her for 10 years. And I'm like, I've worked here for 3.5, 4 years or something. And I've done, I don't know, countless assignments. But she said, now you know what we do. And I was like, yeah, okay, I get it now. But that was it. So I think it was a bit of a game changer, and I felt accepted. It's like, wow, there's got to be an easier way, right? But yeah, so that was tricky. So I don't want to dwell on that project, but it was that was, I guess you realize this, how people live, like day-to-day life for so much of the world is very, very different. And so it's then, as and it was after that I went, I've actually just got to dive in the ocean. I've got to do this for me. I've got to somehow flush my brain out. Yeah.
And has that helped in having that solitude and that connection in the ocean?
Absolutely. And it's funny, it's not funny, but it's interesting because you meet people and you realize everyone's got their own thing, right? And everyone whether it's relational, family, work, health, they've all got their thing. And everyone, I heard someone say recently, you get past the, isn't life great, isn't this amazing kind of thing, and you don't have to go too deep before you find out someone's real story. And I think it's a bit of a melting pot of of healing. There's a lot of people, and it doesn't have to be swimming, but I think the ocean does seem to be a very meditative place, calming, healing place, and for a lot of people, certainly for me. So yeah.
And after such a transformative experience for you right now, particularly after some time of reflection, particularly last year, are you still feeling pulled to going overseas and doing this type of work, or have you had to look at it from a new perspective? Or I absolutely like, yeah. Sometimes I feel like I just want to go to the airport and just wait, just in case they say, "Hey, we got some flights open." I really do, and I don't want to play the age card thing, but I just sit there and it is. Sometimes I think, this is a young man's game, right? And I'm not that old, but I go, how many more years have I got of this? And it's like, come on, I want to get back. There's more. I've got more in me. I want to do more, and I don't quite feel like I've finished. So, but then again, I can look back and I go, I'm actually proud of the work I've done. And that's taken a bit of time for me to go, actually, my life hasn't been that boring. I've done okay, but there's more there. I don't think, I'm not ready to hang up the cameras yet. So yeah, I'd love to, love to get back and love to do something. And definitely. And in all of your experience, this is a big question, so don't overthink it, but I'll preface it with this. I know you're a thinker. But what would be your, quote unquote, ultimate vision for everything that you do? I know a big part of that is to create the awareness. What is it that you want people to do from that awareness of understanding that there's more out there than day-to-day life?
Don't overthink it, she says.
I know you.
Gosh, I just be aware. I think the information's out there. It doesn't take much to find out what's actually going on. I just love people to look deeper. And don't just get your news from one place either, you know, like your best mate on Facebook. You know, it's the information's out there. Get a balanced view of the world and really try and understand. But no, I don't want to sound judgmental or like I'm pointing the finger at anybody, because I like to close myself off from everything as well. But it's I just think, yeah, if there's something that you're interested in or passionate about, or, you know, look into that. But I think for like the humanitarian world, and I know you know this because you've done humanitarian work yourself, and you know, it's out there, you know, and, you know, I know you've sort of jumped on planes and just made those decisions, and it's like you've gone to do it and gone to see for yourself. And I think they're so admirable. And I'd love people to do that. I'd love to see more people do that and just go, you know what, I've got to find out. I've got to find out what's going on in the world. And I don't know, how possible that is, but I just think the information's there. And if you hear things that don't make a whole lot of sense, try and find out, you know, what is the real story. Search for the truth, man. You know?
Yeah, man.
It's the source, man. Yeah. Seek and find, if I can say that as a Christian. Seek and you will find. But it's yeah, I don't know. Storytelling, that's the other thing too. I love good storytelling. So yeah. I just want to find and people stories. You know, I think humans are hardwired for stories. I'm going off on a tangent, but I think you know, we love stories. That's how we make sense of the world. Stories are how we make sense of the world. And yeah, find the good stories, tell the good stories, like you're doing, Jennah.
Well, I definitely agree. I know growing up, I was an only child, so I spent a lot of my day-to-day with my head in books, and it was probably in my early teens that I truly turned to reading about humanitarian workers and the projects that they had experienced. And I certainly know firsthand that is what had me on a plane on my first trip overseas at 18 years old to Kenya. So I can say with certainty that I definitely resonate with the stories, and they can be certainly life-changing. And I'm very, very excited for when you share your story in your book.
Thank you very much. Well, hopefully it will happen, but it's, yeah, I mean, I'm just writing it now. So if, maybe something will come from it. I hope it will, but it's not all doom and gloom. It's really about swimming. it's really about the ocean, but yeah, we'll see. So, yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I definitely know that it won't be all doom and gloom. And I think, as you're saying, it's important to be aware of different aspects of life, even if they're sort of challenging to truly think and reflect on. And I think from what I've already seen of your writing, you're going to share it in a very beautiful and majestic way.
You're very kind. I hope so. I hope so. But I hope it resonates with people, and yeah, we'll see what comes from it.
So, on a final note, Matthew,
yes.
what does it mean to you to be human?
Oh my gosh. This is one of those don't overthink it questions, isn't
yes.
it? Look, I think being connected, which sounds like such a 2021 thing to say, connected to the world around you. You know, that's what I would say. Yeah, it's such a funny time, but I think to be human, we need to understand humanity. But we also need to understand our place in the world, and we need to understand what we as a human race. Oh, actually, now you've got me. I can just feel all my brain's just linked everything up. But yeah, look, understanding our place in the world, understanding how our choices impact other people. You know, our choices can affect the environment. That changing environment affects if people can live elsewhere. It's things like that. You know, our decision at a supermarket can have massive impact on fish stocks, on plastic, you know, on climate change. I think it's probably, to be human, I think, is to understand the impact of your choices, but to be connected with the whole world, not just your own little part of it. Yeah, there you go. Without needing another hour, I'll leave it there.